Charlie's always said that the big thing about it is we started building this little snowball on top of a very long hill. So we started at a very early age in rolling the snowball down. And of course, the snowball, the nature of compound interest is it behaves like a snowball of sticky snow. And the trick is to have a very long hill, which means either starting very young or living to be very old.
Welcome to Personal Finance Cat, where I share my personal take on personal finance.
Today I'm going to talk about the 7 lessons I learned that convinced me that building wealth should be simple. It's not easy, of course, because you still have to put in a lot of hard work and you have to have the willingness to get there. But it should be simple. If you listen to all these finance gurus talk about what you should do, it can really be summarized in a couple of simple actions. Start early.
Start young.
Learn how to invest. Let the compound interest work in your favor. What that basically means is get a high-paying job.
By far the best investment you can make is in yourself.
Put the money in the index fund like S&P 500. Do that consistently for 30 years. You'll be all set.
And that is to consistently buy an S&P 500 low-cost index fund. Keep buying it through thick and thin, and especially through thin.
Most of the actively managed funds just don't outperform the market, so don't even try. And there is a good theory behind it because the S&P 500 is a self-cleansing process. The companies that make into the 500 index, they're already good solid companies. So even though some older companies might be going on the way down and get out of the S&P 500 index, there are always new companies that come in and fill in the gap. So it's kind of like you're always investing in the best companies in the US. Overall, US is still the strongest economy. So really in our lifetime, there shouldn't be any huge surprises that would change that. As a matter of fact, a lot of people outside of the US invest in the S&P 500. So why shouldn't we? Yes, it's simple. Even Warren Buffett approves this, but people still don't want to do it. And I get it because it's a long commitment. People like the getting rich quick stories, right? But we know that that rarely works. So we know all these lessons, we know all these actions that we need to take, but why do people still struggle? I think really there are some lessons I feel obliged to share because I wish I knew these lessons when I was in my 20s. That would really help me tremendously. And these lessons are also simple. It makes very intuitive sense, but somebody just has to summarize it. We need to hear them over and over again to keep us on the right track. All right, so starting from lesson number 1, follow the proven path, and there is no shortcut. One of the biggest myths is that you need to follow your passion, and that cannot be further from the truth. Even though Steve Jobs talks about it, all the successful people seem to indicate that you have to follow your passion. But what is passion really? Are you just born with a certain passion that is waiting to be discovered? Do you just get exposed to something once and you be like, this is it, I'm gonna dedicate my life to this? No, it rarely happens that way. A lot of times people don't want to take the boring route, but coming from my culture, everybody majors in finance, accounting, computer science, engineering. Why? Because those are the fields that can get you really good jobs. Even though, yes, they're boring, they're dry, but there are pockets, there are different subfields in those areas that can be very interesting. For example, finance, right? You might think looking at numbers, looking at spreadsheets, boring. But if you combine finance and technology, let's say if technology is something that you're interested in, you can probably be a fintech executive one day if you have the foundation of very good finance knowledge and an interest in tech. You can combine those and that will be a very, very good career. Same with computer science, same with engineering, same with accounting. See, accounting is the thing that a lot of people think is super boring. But even Warren Buffett says accounting is the language of business. If you know accounting, it can be actually very fun because looking at the 10K and being able to detect these games that the accountants are playing, it takes a lot of skills to look through that, to be able to have confidence in your investment because you know exactly what the financial statements are telling you, besides what the media is saying about what random news is triggering the stock price change. You can really understand the intrinsic value of a company and make sound investing judgment based on that. It's a very, very useful skill. But unfortunately, a lot of people, myself included, really had that negative opinion on accounting. A lot of people also think accounting is very black and white, and that's not true at all. There's a lot of human judgment in accounting. For example, valuation, right? How to value a company. It depends a lot on the assumptions. There are all these fancy models that are trying to value companies for you, but you still have to have human inputs because all these assumptions can be very, very subjective. So how do you make those assumptions? Whether the assumptions are sound and solid. It's a big question. People are worried about AI because they think accounting is such a mundane type of role. AI can easily take over. I don't think so because, again, there are a lot of human judgment that's involved in accounting. That's probably too much of a digression. Anyway, my point is you have to pick a field that has a reasonable chance of being really, really good at. There's a book called So Good That They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport. And that book really debunked the myth of following your passion because passion is something that's developed. Once you get so good at something, it's almost like you can't do anything but be passionate about it. So even these dry, boring fields can really trigger passion. I've seen a lot of people who just develop that passion because they have become so trenched in that field and they become so good at the field. They really create a lot of value. And that's the case for a lot of much more famous people like Steve Jobs. So one example in that book, So Good They Can't Ignore You, the author basically said, yes, Steve Jobs mentioned in the Stanford commencement that people should follow their passion. But if you look at his actual journey, he wanted to be a spiritual leader. He went to India, he might have gone to Japan, because he's very, very into the Zen philosophy. Eventually he came back to the United States because I think someone convinced him that he really has this talent, and if he dedicated to building a tech company, it will be a much greater contribution to humanity, and that's what he did. And he also got so good at building quality products. Apple is known for the high quality products, and a lot of people say that Steve Jobs was very hard to work for because he's just so obsessed with high quality, and he's very, very good at it. He's probably the best at it, to be honest. So his passion really was developed through just doing it over and over and striving to become the best. So yes, it takes hard work, it takes time, it takes dedication. You have to get really good at what you do because that's what all the successful people have done. The chances are better if you pick a field that is more likely to create some really good skill sets. Another example I hear so often is that if you want to be an athlete, if you want to be an actress, if you want to be a dancer, a musician, the chances of getting really good and getting really highly compensated is really, really slim. The top 0.00001% can have a really, really high salary. So you either make a crazy amount of money or you make zero. There's just no in between. But for accountants, for example, there are just so many levels of competencies and their compensation vary accordingly. A lot of them, if not all of them, can have a job. So the odds are really in your favor compared to trying to become the top athlete and getting those multi-million-dollar contracts. So think about that, right? Do you really want to go after your passion if it's something that has such a slim chance of getting you somewhere? Or you want to just follow something that is much more proven? Let's say if you're into sports, right? How about becoming a marketing professional? You can be the marketing person at a very big sports company like NFL or NHL. You can still be associated with your passion, but you're doing something that you can get really good at and have much less competition.